There we go.
Okay, well, hello everyone and good evening. My name is Jeremy Schneider. I'm the communications manager for the Orange County Land Trust. For those not familiar with us, we're a nonprofit organization that works with willing landowners to permanently protect their properties. Our land protection efforts typically focus on lands that are important for maintaining water quality, agriculture, wildlife migration, climate resilience. That said, first, I just want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I also want to thank all of our panel speakers, as well as tonight's co-sponsor, Cornell Cooperative Extension of Orange County. I also want to recognize someone in attendance with us this evening, John Gebhards. John's a founding board member of the Orange County Land Trust and was a big inspiration behind creating this event. I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion as we talk about what we're all seeing in terms of increased flooding events and downpours, from observations to recorded data. We're going to be learning about flood mitigation projects this evening, rebuilding infrastructure, and enhancing our natural infrastructure, open space, climate resilience planning, state and federal initiatives, and a host of other topics. We hope that these discussions tonight will help inspire you and Orange County as a whole to continue working together to engage communities and equip them with the tools they need in order to adapt and respond to hazardous and extreme weather events. At the end of the day, this is about strengthening communities and infrastructure, ensuring the resilience of our local economy and that of our agricultural community, fortifying our local food supply, and safeguarding drinking water, and simply protecting lives and property. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Eric Schellenberg, commercial horticulture and natural resources educator with Cornell Cooperative, who's going to be facilitating tonight's discussion.
In terms of the project steps.
Sorry, so a couple announcements. It seems like the large number of people signing on is creating some bandwidth issues. So if you could turn off your video if you're not currently speaking, I think that will help. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so if you're not currently speaking, turn your video off. Make sure the mute is on or that you are muted. Hopefully that's working. If there are any issues, I'll be looking at the chat box. So please let me know if anything does come up and it looks or sounds unintelligible. So I'm just going to share a quick screen here. All right, so this is the outline for this evening's roundtable. After introductions here, we're going to talk primarily about flooding and how it pertains to agriculture systems, especially within Orange County. We have some very special types of farmland here that are uncommon elsewhere. And then we're going to transition the conversation into infrastructure, communities, and planning. There are definitely some parallels. If you could mute yourself, we did this as a meeting, so everybody has to mute themselves. And then we'll talk about mitigation through land conservation, so mitigation of the negative impacts of flooding. Just so that you know, this is being recorded, and at the end of it, you'll be able to go and look and get everybody's email and contact information here in case you wanted to follow up with anybody going forward. So I just wanted to say a couple things. Well, working with farmers and being a farmer, I hear a lot of different opinions about climate change. Not everybody is convinced, of course, on the global issue of, well, sea level rise and carbon dioxide levels, and there are a lot of changes happening. But we have to be sensitive, I think, when we are talking to certain stakeholders that may not share those views. It's always an opportunity to make inroads and see, okay, well, what do they believe? What have they seen directly? Because more often than not, if people focus on things that they actually see and things that impact them, that does open the door a little bit more than starting at the top and going down. But that being said, the DEC recently released a pretty good report here called Observed and Projected Climate Change in New York, an overview, and it goes through all of the major topics one by one. It's got a lot of good information in there. And we can't really talk about flooding resilience without talking about the vulnerabilities. And like I said before, Orange County has some very special vulnerabilities, got somewhere in the vicinity of 18 to 20,000 acres of muck, which is mostly all in floodplains. High value crops are grown here, high potential for flooding and risk there. So what has Cornell been doing about this? Cornell has developed the Climate Smart Farming program, and they have a lot of tools that are available to farmers on that website. And that can include classic growing degree day calculators, water deficit and drought monitoring mapping. A really great one is a cover crop scheduler to help farmers know when they can plant things based on what's actually happening weather-wise, climate-wise that year. Freeze damage mapping for apples, grapes, other crops. A really important one is nitrogen management tool that's sensitive to climate data, because nitrogen is very volatile. It can leave into the air, it can leave into the water and cause all kinds of environmental impacts. And it's very important to put your nitrogen down at the right time, climate-wise. And seasonal temperature and precipitation outlooks, lots of other stuff on there. And I thought I'd just end with some good news, which is here's a seasonal precipitation outlook. This is sort of like the modern, a little bit more scientific version of the Farmer's Almanac, really. So you can see we fall in the 50-50 zone for seasonal precipitation, meaning we shouldn't be expecting necessarily drought or extreme rains, at least through May. And then here's the outlook for temperature. Looks like at least from now until May, we're probably good chances going to be above average temperatures. Anyway, I thought I'd just end with a little bit of a good news there. So let me just bring back that first one there. So next up, we're going to jump into hearing a little bit from Lindsay Cooper from Department of Environmental Conservation.
Hi, everyone. Just give me 1 second to share my screen.
Yep.
Okay, can you all see this okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Lindsay Cooper. I am the Climate Outreach Specialist for the DEC Hudson River Estuary Program, and we work in partnership with the Cornell Water Resources Institute. The DEC Estuary Program has been around for about 35 years. We're a non-regulatory part of the DEC, and we collaborate with many partners, including nonprofits, citizens, academic and scientific institutions, local governments, et cetera, all to try to achieve some key benefits for a healthier Hudson. Our team, the climate team, focuses on the climate adaptive communities benefit here, but if you're interested, our work is guided by this 2021 to 2025 action agenda that we recently released. And you can read more about what the other teams that we work with do. So I just want to jump right in and start talking about some climate concepts. So I like this explanation of climate versus weather, which describes weather as something that, it's basically the clothes you wear each day, and climate can be thought of as all of the different clothes in your closet. All this to say that climate is the long-term average of weather. So climate is always changing. Historically, it has changed, but right now we're in a period where it's changing rapidly. And the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are creating a more insulated atmosphere that's leading to more extremes. And New York State's climate is actually changing faster than national and global averages. New York State takes global climate models and can downscale them for our state and for our region. And that can help us predict some of what we might see in the coming decades. So for climate hazards, you can see here, increasing temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, rising sea level are all hazards that can lead to impacts such as heat waves, short-term drought, and flooding. And I'm going to talk about some projections for Region 2. So Orange County is counted within Region 2. This information is from NYSERDA, from the Climate Report. I'll talk a little bit about air and temperature, but I'm going to focus mostly on precipitation and sea level rise. But we're seeing that average air temperature is increasing. We're seeing warmer days and more heat waves. So not only more heat waves per year, but the average number of days per heat wave is also increasing throughout the decades. And we're also seeing an increase in precipitation. So the percent increase in annual precipitation, if you look here in 2020, it's 1 to 8%. Through the 2050s, it's 3 to 11%, and upward through 2100. So we're seeing more days with precipitation greater than 1 inch. Similar concept here, it's increasing. And then a higher number of days with precipitation greater than 2 inches as well. And then one of the biggest concerns is sea level rise. So as you can see here, and we're going to focus on this lower portion of the table here. So New York City and the lower Hudson region would be where Orange County is included. So within our current decade of the 2020s, we see 2 to 10 inches of sea level rise. By 2050, that could be between 8 and 30 inches. By the 2080s, that could be between 13 and 58. And then by 2100, between 15 and 75 inches. And I am showing this image just to have a little bit of a visualization of what that could look like. So if you look at the dark blue on the bottom right here, it's current high tide. Add 12 inches of sea level rise on top of that. And of course, in this image here, there's just a tree on the shoreline, but in real life, there's much more at risk. So this is an image from the Scenic Hudson Sea Level Rise Mapper. And this is a really great tool if you want to see what sea level rise could look like in your area. It's available online, and I can share the link in the chat. But this is the Newburgh waterfront in its current condition. And as you can see, this is Newburgh's waterfront in its current condition plus a 1% flood. So for anyone who's not familiar with the term 1% flood, a 1% flood has a 1% chance of happening each year, which is compounded over years. So over the course of 30 years, that 1% chance can turn into roughly 25% chance. And that's based on historical data, and it doesn't include future projections. So, what we're learning is that our 1% storm or 1% flood could get bigger and more common with climate change. So this is what the waterfront would look like here. You can see in yellow here along the riverfront where flooding could happen, where there would be some inundation. And then we're looking at current condition plus 12 inches of sea level rise, which based off of the table I showed earlier, could happen, within the 2020s. So here we start to see a little bit of blue. I hear someone, if someone's unmuted. Oh, I think it went away. And then we are at 2050s, 30 inches of sea level rise. And you see a lot more blue here. You also see that the area is shifting further inland. 60 inches by the 2080s. So much more deep water here in the front, and then also still shifting further inland. And, we could anticipate 72 inches by the 2100s. That's on the higher range of what's possible. But this is how much, we could expect. And of course, this will have a tremendous impact on our lifestyle, on almost every aspect of our lives. And this is an example of the economic impact of flooding in Orange County. So this is the estimated damage from flooding and inundation will increase throughout the decades. Right now, for a 10% storm or a storm that has a 10% chance of happening each year, it could cost $500,000 in damage. But by 2080s, with the extra 72 inches of sea level rise potentially, it could be around 25 million. And then similarly for a 1% storm, the cost increases many times over. So where can we look for solutions? Today, we're going to have a number of presenters who will be talking about solutions, which is wonderful. And I'll share briefly a few things that we're doing at the DEC. So we partake in, or we assist communities with the Climate Smart Communities program. We've got the Climate Adaptive Design Studio. So our application for the 2022 studio is coming out soon. So keep an eye out for that. We spent our 2021 studio in Poughkeepsie. There's the Flood Resilience Network, which currently 14 local governments in the Hudson Valley participate in. And our goal is by 2025 to double that number. So that's something that's really wonderful for municipalities to partake in to discuss some of these issues. And then our watershed team of the DEC works on improving road stream crossings, working on culverts, removing dams, and working on improving riparian buffers with the Trees for Trips program. And then our conservation land use team also works on identifying, prioritizing, and protecting natural resources. So we also have a number of funding opportunities. This is a list of, or a summary of the 2021 adaptation and resilience grants. So for 2022, our funding opportunities haven't been announced yet. Last year, they were announced around the springtime. So keep an eye out for those, but if you're interested in seeing what we have done in the past, please take a look at this webpage, which I will also send in the chat. And I just wanted to note that the Climate Action Council has released their draft scoping plan. So this plan serves as an initial framework for how the state will achieve its climate goals related to the CLCPA. So this is a chance for the public to read and understand and provide feedback, which is really important. So please check that out. And thank you again so much. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be available by email. You could message me here and I'll send some of this information in the chat. And I'm really looking forward to hearing all the other presenters.
Thank you so much. That was some really great information in a very short period of time.
Thank you.
We'll have time for some Q&A at the end of the presentations as well, just so you know. Next up, we have Mary Ulrich, Agriculture Program Lead from Cornell Cooperative Extension.
Here I come. So I'm just setting the stage for the agriculture portion and sort of going to mention the infrastructure, how that can change. So because I've been working with farmers in Orange County, this will be my 32nd summer I'm entering. And so I see change. We used to get worked with vegetable farmers. We're very sensitive to, rainfall. I mean, all farmers are, but especially on the muck where a lot of folks don't irrigate, we definitely have changed. We used to get an inch a week. about. I mean, it's not like there wasn't hail or whatever, but an inch a week, and now we get 2 inches, just as the previous speaker mentioned, where it's less frequent, but it's more when it comes. So now we get 2 inches or 3 inches every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And there's a problem with that, because then that's not enough for the plants to grow. So more people have to invest in irrigation. And when it comes, if the ground is dry, then it comes hard and fast, it doesn't absorb as well, more likely to run off, more likely to lose soil. This is farmers, that's their moneymaker, is their soil. So it's tiny little changes over time that we've all seen are not good for the industry. And we can all, I mean, I don't think I know a farmer who would argue with me on the point that weather has gotten more kind of crazy, variable over the last 30 years, that it's not as predictable as it had been, and much wider swings in dry and warm, and hot and cold and dry and wet. And so I worry that we plan for these, 1% storms, 10% storms, or 1 in 10 years, 1 in 100 years. Well, it seems like we get the 1 in 10 years pretty much almost every year, at least 1 in 3. And the 1 in 100 years are coming every 10 years or 20 years. They're much more frequent. So that is costing money. It's costing the industry. And it's somewhat of because we have non-agricultural folks on here, because it is a little bit of a rural legend that, hey, farmers have crop insurance and that's what that's for. Sure. But it doesn't really protect them financially. And they do have to pay a premium for it. And much of the premium, because it's subsidized by USDA, is paid by taxpayers. So this has a cost outside of just the losses. It does, the more the federal government has to subsidize crop insurance and the more payouts there are, then the premiums go up, because it by and large is a privatized but subsidized by the federal government system that is very expensive to. And that gets into infrastructure. So are there things we can do to protect the farms? Maybe, I'm all hot on impervious surfaces. A lot of times municipalities for commercial properties, like we have ag properties and commercial, and there's nothing in between. And even if it's a small commercial, because it's commercial, we got to put down macadam, blacktop. That's impervious surface. So maybe the things that can change surface water situations that cause flooding for farmers, or surface water, backups, which even if it's not a huge event, if we get a backup, that crop is not saleable, even if it's only there for a few minutes, because then it's a food safety issue. So I'm done, and I don't know if Eric, Greg, or whether I should just hand it over to Greg.
Okay, you can turn your microphone off. So next up, we're gonna have Greg DeBuck. He's the president of DeBuck Sod Company.
Yeah, hi, can everyone hear me? I'm sorry, it got dark, I'm in my car, and the beauty of Zoom here.
We can hear you.
Do this. So listen in, actually, if Jeremy's still on, he actually has my slide. So if he screen shares, a couple of things I have to know. But anyways, introducing myself, Greg DeBuck, Sod Farm here in Pine Island. Our family's been here 40 years, and in Pine Island, we grow sod and soybeans on the muck soil. My dad is Leonard DeBuck, involved with many things. Maybe you recognize that name. And we also grow corn and pumpkins on an upland farm that is a preserved former dairy farm through preservation rights through the town of Warwick. That was purchased. So we have a little experience with that. So we were asked to give a little insight, maybe on a firsthand sort of thing on what's going on in the muck. It's good to see some familiar names. Is the screen share up? No.
It'll be up in about a minute.
Okay. Okay, I'll keep going. That's if they get the images up, that's great. The first one shows there a pallet of sod, and the combine harvester there is harvesting soybeans, and then the tree line.
I got it on,
behind
Greg. Yep.
Yep. The reason I see it now, yeah. Can everyone hear me okay still, I presume?
Yep.
The Wallkill River there is in that tree line. So that's how close we are to that. And then also, that's my youngest daughter there with the cornfield and the sunset. So if you want to go to the next slide, you'll see that we are on both our farms are on the banks of the Wallkill and the Pochuck. So that's a Pine Island aerial, short on time, but if you familiarize yourself with that, the crossroads of Pine Island are in the center of that map. Goshen is towards the upper right. County gives you a brief view of the black dirt. That's probably about half of the whole valley. But the Wallkill comes in from Sussex and New Jersey, northern Jersey. The Rutgers Creek comes from the Minisink side of town, and Pochuck comes from Warwick and Vernon. All those three drain into Pine Island and eventually out, and the Wallkill, interestingly enough, flows north, generally towards Montgomery, and then up towards New Paltz, and eventually to the Hudson. Obviously, this soil, this valley is a blessing, and because of our great rich soils, but also we are at the mercy of the rivers, and that can be a problem, as we've talked about with these more recurring flooding events and why we're all here today. So if you do want to go to the next slide, the first observation I have is a more frequent rains or a rise, causing those heavy rains that we talk about cause a quick rise in the rivers. This is a USGS graph that's just flood height in feet. That's each line there is a foot. So this was the storm. The higher rise in that graph is it rained heavy there just before Labor Day. I think it was the first day of school this year in September. I recorded 4 or 5 inches of rain. You could see by September 3rd there, this is a gauge that's on Oil City Road, which is on kind of the state line here on the Wallkill River. And it rose above 13 feet or pretty close there. And it goes up pretty quick. Noted there, though, is that first bump in the graph is a rain event when we're in a dry period, and really our ground absorbed that, right? Because we went through a drier August. So we can almost handle one storm, but then when you get them back to back, or when you get 4 or 5 inches, that's when we really start to take measures to prepare for flooding. The 3 or 4 inches and even a 5-inch forecast is really a tipping point for us. So first observation is we're seeing those extreme events. Second observation is it's coming faster downstream towards us. 4 inches on our fields, 6 inches, any of those events on that water that lands on our fields is not the problem. It's what's coming downstream. So that 4 inches accumulates, or that 6-inch event, and it comes downstream and becomes feet and obviously a larger volume of water. I'm not a hydrologist and I'm not getting into that today, but it's not the water that lands on our farms that floods us. It's what comes down the river. And that's going back to my first observation. It comes a little quicker now than it ever has before. Okay, so that was that picture. if you, yeah, that, so the next slides there show, that was the September, 2021. Soybeans that are quite mature there, the water is up and over the top of them. That is one of our sod fields. Funny enough, that's 2 or 3 days after the heavy rain, obviously not a cloud in the sky or sun shining, but the water had risen for 2 more days. So the day after the storm was a nice day, and I was completely able to walk in that field. You won't be able to see it, but there's a stake out there that I almost considered harvesting sod there. So that was harvestable sod ready to go. A day later, and the water had rose onto our fields. It overfloods the banks of the river and onto the farm fields that we are in close proximity to. The other problem is it doesn't go away fast. We're in that meandering, slow part of the valley. We're very flat from Pine Island all the way to Goshen. It covers 14,000 acres, I believe. And so it doesn't get out very fast either. It comes to our area and it slows down and accumulates. We can be, just from this storm in September, we were underwater in portions of the farm for upwards of a week, 7 days post-storm. And that can cause significant damage to soybeans, onions, and those crops. Turf and sod, we've been okay. Like that field there with the sod on it, we probably lost 10% from this storm. Edges and stuff that really, it's soaked on for a long time. If you want to go the next slide, Hurricane Irene and Lee, back-to-back storms in 2011, all familiar with that. That left us underwater in our valley for upwards of 20 to 22 days, 2 back-to-back 10-inch rainstorms. If you can make out the pictures there, the top left is the high water. That's probably 6 or 10 feet of water deep. He's not standing on a field, he's standing on what would be a dike or a levee that typically stands 6 feet above our field levels. The field level there, to the picture to the right there, a couple flags shows where that's after the flood went away, but the fields were left inundated and just dead. The last picture leads me into the next discussion a little bit, but I did want to step back. The third observation is going back to the peaks do come faster, and the river, how the river's handling the floods versus 30 years ago. Anyway, since these storms, large efforts have been put forth by farmers in conjunction with office, support from the state, and also our local soil and water office, and you'll hear more from Kevin on that next. It has been in combined efforts, and that. So let's see. Those projects. This is a small project where that excavator stands. We moved away from the river, giving up some of the land to better improve a majority of the land. Certainly, that's not always a great scenario, but that's how we want to. We got to make it better for ourselves. Moving forward, I wanted to put forward a couple ideas or different things I'm seeing. I hope I'm representing all farms or whatnot in our valley, that we want to continue to improve our drainage basin, if we want to call it that, or what drains to us, what drains through, and the different ways we can do that. We certainly need to look at what's coming down and why it's coming so fast. It'd be nice if everyone absorbed everything that lands on them for that day, a day, or let everything drain slowly. Obviously, that's not the case anymore, but obviously we know a parking lot drains to a discharge pipe a lot faster than a farm field or a forest. But even certain things like runoff implications from a conserved or a cover cropped farm versus traditional tillage or strip tilling or this or that. So there is federal programs I wanted to mention. I think some of them fall a little short. The CREP program it doesn't really involve flooding, but it's prevalent in our valley and whatnot. But the other is wildlife refuge, which New Jersey has just to our south in our valley. And I would like them to absorb more of the water coming down the river instead of them actually blocking it out with their own dike systems. It'd be nice if they absorbed some of the peaks before it comes further down the river. Anyways, I think I'm probably getting pretty close on time, but the final suggestions might be, considering I'm kind of a grass person. Obviously, I have a turf grass science degree and also a sod farmer. Certainly see the benefits of anything where we have grass cover, whether it's a job site that we're putting sod on, a home site, or a grassy waterway on a farm, or a containment zone of water containment zone for a commercial building. Grass is very good fibrous roots for holding soil. I say we're not just in the business of selling great sod for a new lawn, but you get the added benefit of it being a erosion control product that you wouldn't really think of. In conclusion, I have a photo there. My daughter really took to this field of soybeans, and she was in kindergarten at the time. But we have a future of. I have 4 kids, and they love farming, but we want to have a future in our valley. And supplying food locally is important. And I think looking at the big picture of our watershed, the Wallkill and its tributaries are very important to our local farming community here in the Black Dirt, but even as Orange County as a whole, as it flows right down the middle of Orange County. And I doubt I have a time for a question because I feel like that's more than 5 minutes. Eric?
We can make a quick question happen if anybody's got a super burning question, or we can just save it for the Q&A later on. Yeah. If it's okay. Well, thank you so much for that. I think it's always super important to hear directly from farmers whose livelihoods are so deeply impacted by flooding. It's one thing to write a report from, a bunch of graphs and a bunch of computer models, but it's another one to actually live through these events. And people like Greg are more motivated to find solutions than maybe the average person by a little bit. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing here. And next up, we've got Kevin Sumner, who's the district manager at Orange County Soil and Water Conservation District.
Okay, thanks. I'm not going to try to share my screen because I probably get myself in trouble. But I did post a document on our website, ocsoilny.org, with a little bit more expanded version of what I'm going to try to talk about tonight, along with some pictures and some maps, which are really helpful to get this stuff in perspective. And some of Eric's slides helped us to do that already. So if you forgive me for going through a list, mainly I'm going to talk about our floodplain benching project in the Black Dirt area tonight. And I want to recognize all the partners that helped to make that happen. This really all kicked off largely after the Hurricane Lee and Tropical Storm Irene events in 2011. In 2013, Senator Bonacek, who was our local senator at that time, was able to initiate an appropriation of $2 million, which was really crucial to get this whole initiative started. And the state has helped us in many other funding ways. Former Senator Bonacek was able to secure a SAM grant for us in the amount of $400,000. And we've gotten several grants through state Soil and Water Conservation Committee, and Jennifer, who's speaking after me, will go into more detail on some of those opportunities. We've also had great partnerships with the permitting agencies. We needed permits from the Army Corps, from DEC, and from the local municipalities, and that process worked very smoothly. So we were very pleased about how that went. And we've also have a key partner, our engineers from Barton and LaJudas, doing the core design work. And the County of Orange has helped us with funding as well as services that we otherwise would have had to pay for. And of course, the partnership of the farmers and the landowners. So there's been some discussion already tonight about the black dirt, about how unique it is. There's a really interesting and long history of that area being developed for farming, which required not only flood control measures, but also drainage to lower the water table. Some time ago, I was involved in a field meeting in the black dirt with some farmers and some state officials, and the farmers were talking about how the area was flooding more frequently, and that's also been discussed already this evening. And one of the state officials said, well, what do you expect? You're farming in a floodplain, which technically is correct, but was not a very sensitive statement, given that these farmers who are so important to our community were experiencing flooding that was really threatening their viability. So at Soil and Water, we want to do everything we can to help keep that area economically viable. There are actually entities and individuals who believe that the whole black dirt should get turned back into a wetland, and we don't share that viewpoint. If we had ample productive uplands in Orange County that we could farm on, then there might be an argument to look at the costs of keeping the black dirt viable. But many of our best soils in Orange County are now under houses and warehouses. So at least the black dirt has some natural protection from non-agricultural development. So we see ourselves staying very involved in trying to help that keep that area viable. So it's already been mentioned that there's several causes of the flooding. It's not just the climate change issues, but it's also the more stormwater coming in from New Jersey and a number of other issues that are causing the more frequent flooding in the black dirt. So I don't know how many people have heard of the Room for the River program in the Netherlands. Our program is very similar to that, not as catchy of a name, but the basic concept is that we're giving land back to the river. I think there's many examples of where trying to hold large storms into the river channel with our man-made structures has resulted in devastation, and we're learning that we need to give some of that land back to the river. So we hear phrases like, we need to fix the river. The river really isn't broken. We've just encroached on it, and we need to get more of a balance. So that's the concept of the floodplain benching project. It's basically, for the most part, designed to provide a level of economic protection for the farmers. We're trying to contain a 10-year storm in the artificial floodplain. It's not nearly as wide as the natural floodplain of the glacial lake that composes the black dirt area, but it's a compromise to give some of the land back to the river, but to allow the adjacent areas to still be farmed. So one of the things that we've learned along the way is that there's really multiple benefits to this program. because in addition to the primary flood mitigation benefit, there's a lot of environmental benefits as well. And that has actually helped us in terms of some of the funding sources that we've been able to secure, because we're essentially creating a buffer between the agricultural lands and the river. And we're implementing a pretty ambitious planting plan to restore that area to a forested riparian buffer. A lot of the farmers initially were more in favor of a meadow type cover for the floodplain bench, which from a common sense standpoint for floodwater conveyance makes a lot of sense. But the permitting agencies weren't in favor of that, and for various reasons, primarily having to do with Indiana bat habitat, the permitting conditions require us to establish trees on the floodplain bench. So ultimately, as these areas as the bench is created and as they're planted and the trees mature, we'll actually be creating a much more robust riparian buffer as the Wallkill passes through the black dirt area. So what we've completed to date runs from about 3/4 of a mile from the Cheechunk Canal to County Route 1. And if you remember from the aerial photo that was put up earlier, or if you look at my my document that's on our website, you'll pick out the Cheechunk Canal quite readily, because it's an arrow straight drainage and flood control project that was done in the 1930s under the direction of the Army Corps. And that canal has been very effective at providing flood control to the northern half of the black dirt area. So a lot of the farmers were in favor of extending that same canal concept, which would have showed flood mitigation benefits. However, it would have been much more challenging to permit. The beauty of the floodplain bench project is that we really don't even need to touch the actual river channel. We're just excavating the land on either side of it. So there's much less water quality concerns during construction and less permitting concerns, because we're not actually excavating in the channel of the Wallkill. It's really hard to conceive of the amount of soil that was moved in this project just in the first 3/4 of a mile. It's over 200,000 cubic yards of dirt, which put in more understandable terms is over 12,000 dump truck loads of dirt that were relocated. And the reason why we started there is because the tributaries that Greg mentioned, the Rutgers Creek and the Pochuck Creek, both come into the Wallkill in this 3/4 of a mile section between the Cheechunk Canal and County Route 1. So that it was really sort of a bottleneck of all that water trying to get into the Wallkill and get downstream. So we've completed most of that that work at that 3/4 mile section. We have one more area that's going to get done this summer, and then that initial 3-phase, 3/4 of a mile section of benching will be complete. And we're already in the process of permitting and design for the next phase that will continue upstream from County Route 1 towards the New Jersey line, with the ultimate goal of carrying this benching project all the way to the wildlife refuge area that Greg mentioned, which is at the upstream end of the black dirt area. So people probably want to know about the money. It's been going on for a long time with a lot of different funding sources, but in round numbers, we've spent about $3 million since 2013 on this work, and we project that it would require another 8 to 10 million in order to get up to the upstream end of the black dirt. So it's a continual process of implementing with the funding that we have at hand and looking forward to try to secure additional funding and to keep the design and permitting work one step ahead of everything. So I'll stop there and definitely be hanging around if there's some questions at the end of the meeting tonight.
Thank you so much. That's a really phenomenal project. If you haven't seen it, you should go check it out. So next up, we've got Jennifer Clifford, Climate Resilient Farming Program Manager with the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets.
Thank you. I'm just working on sharing my screen. Sorry for the pause. Let me get this in full view. All right, excellent. So thanks for inviting me tonight to this important webinar panel. And I am Jennifer Clifford. I'm with the New York State Soil and Water Conservation Committee and the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. And I oversee our Climate Resilient Farming Grant Program. So climate change has really disrupted lives and businesses in New York State in a variety of ways, but no sector is more reliant on the weather than agriculture. So climate change really has the impacts to increased risk of soil erosion, reduce soil quality, lower agricultural productivity, increase risk of pollution events, and provide risk to our food security. But our agriculture sector also has the ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They have the capacity to sequester carbon, and as well as providing co-benefits when implementing some of these regenerative ag practices that also improve water quality, and as well as these practices help to continue the viability of our agriculture sector and our rural economies. So the goal of the Climate Resilient Farming Grant Program is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on farms and increase the resiliency of New York State farms in the face of a changing climate. This program follows our agricultural environmental management framework. This is just a framework where our technical service providers through our soil and water conservation districts are able to work with a farm to identify sustainability issues or areas where they're excelling, and to maybe plan for some areas where they want to make some changes, implement some best management practices, and then follow through with doing so. So our grant programs, we work very closely with our soil and water conservation districts to administer our agricultural environmental management program and provide technical assistance to farmers, and then match up some cost share assistance that can help best implement those best management practices that they've planned out. So our soil and water conservation districts that we just saw Kevin present just before me, they're very important to administering our programs. They really help do the grant administration while allowing the farms to kind of just focus on implementing the projects. So we have several programs, but I'm going to focus on our Climate Resilient Farming Grant Program, which is most relevant to funding flood mitigation projects on farms. This project or program was launched in 2015. To date, we've awarded $12 million to 200 farms across the state. Through the practices that we've awarded, we've estimated that 320,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent per year emission reductions will occur. And that's equivalent to removing 69,000 cars from the road for 1 year. Currently, our CRF grant program funds projects through 3 different tracks of funding. We fund manure storage cover and flare systems to reduce methane emissions on farm, water management systems, which I'll focus on mostly today, And then our Healthy Soils program, where we fund cover crops, no-till, those types of practices. We do currently have round 6 open, and we have $8 million available in this round. So between the 3 tracks, we do split up the funding. So we have $4 million available for cover and flare projects, $2 million available for water management projects, and $2 million available for Healthy Soils NY projects. So we fund manure storage, cover, and flares because they can both impact the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions on farms, as well as increasing resiliency. So this puts an impermeable cover over the manure storage, and then piping the emitted methane and other gases away from the facility and burning it in a flare, as you can see in the picture here. It also increases resiliency of a farm because it eliminates rainwater from entering the storage. So this is helps with water quality concerns, and this also reduces the emissions associated with spreading the millions of gallons of water along with the manure. So I'm going to quickly just mention our track 3 is our Healthy Soils NY. We fund soil health projects because they help increase the resiliency of a farm. It was mentioned earlier that cover cropping is important to helping increase the soil's ability to hold water, as well as to improve recycling of nitrogen by crops, and which also helps to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. But most relevant to our discussion today is our water management track, where we are really helping agricultural producers prepare for flood events as well as drought impacts. So water management includes many best management practices which help to stabilize and reinforce conveyances, reduce flows of water, and/or store water. Conservation systems such as transferring land to perennial production or forest buffer can also create beneficial carbon sinks. So we do, under our water management projects, we want to direct, we want to slow, we want to diffuse water flows so that there isn't such a buildup on these fields as we saw earlier. And this can be done through diversions, grassed and lined waterways, proper sizing of culverts, water and sediment control basins, as well as providing storage for water, so ponds and wetlands. So some of the systems that we fund under this track are riparian buffer systems, stream corridor and shoreline management systems, erosion control systems, irrigation water management systems, access control, even prescribed grazing. Also, systems that involve green infrastructure are eligible. So this is one of the projects that we just heard highlighted. We have funded a few portions of this long-term project that Orange County Soil and Water Conservation District is undertaking. We've funded portions of it through rounds 1, 2, and 5 of CRF for just over $500,000 for matching for the project. And I won't spend too much on this because we just heard all about it, but this is just kind of a quick picture of some of those trees and that floodplain bench going in. Another example of a project that we've done in Erie County is to improve soil resiliency, to replace and improve underground pipe, construct grade stabilization structures for water, as well as reconnect stream to its historic floodplain and attenuate storm flows to a wooded area above a cropland, so diverting water away. Also, including micro irrigation system helps with water efficiency on the farm. I will just mention, I just thought we have another program, our Hudson Valley Carbon Farming Pilot Project, that we have also funded a water table management project in the Black Dirt to help with flood mitigation as well. So our CRF round 6 is open right now. Our RFP is open. There's $8 million available, $2 million for water management. The applications are due March 28th, and RFP materials can be found on the department's website, as well as a list of other projects that we've funded in the past, if you're interested in seeing some of the other projects that we funded across the state. And farmers interested are encouraged to reach out to their local soil and water conservation district. Here locally, please reach out to Kevin. So thank you very much for having me. That's all I had to share today, and happy to answer any questions or feel free to follow up with me via email. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much for going over that. Those are really important grants that are available for farmers. So water knows no boundaries. And although we're going to switch gears here and talk about a different, how flooding impacts a different type of infrastructure, the infrastructure in our communities and how we plan around that. Water doesn't care whether it's flooding an agricultural field or flooding someone's home. And so what happens on the farm fields can impact what happens in our towns and cities and vice versa. So we've heard that increased amount of hard surface, impervious surface in development areas can have a pretty big impact on farms by letting the water get into waterways quicker, flooding fields for longer. And the opposite can also be true sometimes, where if there's better water management on farms and there's more infiltration as a result of good cover crop management and other things, there may be mitigated flooding on the other end. So to start off the infrastructure communities and planning section, we're going to have Alan Sorensen, who's the Commissioner of Orange County Department of Planning.
Jeremy, thank you. I'm just getting my screen set up. So hopefully everyone can see the screen. So what I wanted to speak to are the 3 major planning initiatives that the Department of Planning has underway. The first being the county's open space plan update. The last time the open space plan was updated was in 2004. And so we've begun the process of updating that comprehensive plan. Over the last 2 decades, landscape of the county has significantly changed. Influences including climate change, development pressure, changing energy infrastructure are expected to have widespread landscape impacts throughout the county. It's important to note that the county is, according to the 2020 census of the county, New York State's 62 counties, the population in Orange County grew by 7.6%, making it the fastest growing population in the state of New York. Planning for growth requires protecting valuable natural resources, cultural resources, and the working landscape, farms and forestry lands, while balancing the needs for development, housing, and transportation infrastructure. Our current status of the open space plan, we have a ArcGIS hub set up for the open space plan. We've begun the process of conducting online surveys. So far, we have 23 responses to the built environment survey and 47 responses to the general survey. For the listeners here tonight, just would ask that if you have the opportunity to take a look at the open space website and take a few moments to complete the surveys. More information that we can receive will help us be better informed as we develop the open space plan. And our schedule is, we started this effort back in 2021. We are now gearing up for the in-person public engagement process. We'll be working closely with the Orange County Land Trust in that endeavor. And our focus for 2023 will be some additional in-person engagement and wrapping up the draft final open space plan and adoption for 2023. We are also working very closely with West Point. We obtained a military installation resiliency study grant and have just kicked off that effort. The purpose of the project is to identify and analyze risk to the electric energy supply at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Also to look at opportunities to benefit towns of Highland, Village of Highland Falls. And we're looking to identify and prioritize projects and actions to increase energy security. And we have, I should mention that for the open space plan, as well as for the military installation resiliency plan, we have both planning advisory committees and study advisory groups that are working with us. So I want to acknowledge the significant contribution from those volunteer members in these endeavors. And we look forward to the public engagement as we move forward on these projects. In addition to, I should say the schedule on this one is a little more aggressive. So we're here in February, March, and we are looking to complete this effort, working with our study advisory group and have a draft plan in place by October of 2022. We are also concurrently working on an Orange County Climate Resilience Plan. We're working with WSP on that endeavor. I also want to acknowledge the good work of the Planning Department Environmental Unit, consisting of Zach Coleman, Jen McLeod, and Jessica Ridgway, who are departmental staff who are working on each of these projects with me. The climate resilience is the ability to cope and adapt to climate change. We're evaluating how climate change may impact Orange County's population, economy, government services, infrastructure, natural resources, cultural resources, and identify resilient strategies and top projects to arm the county's resilience. Some of the projects that were talked about previously are hopefully the type of projects, additional projects like that, that we'll be able to put in place to make the county more resilient in the future. The current status, we have a website set up. I recognize that's probably very difficult to see, but if you go to our webpage, Orange County Planning, you'll be able to find the links. We're working to finalize our vision statement. We've conducted our first public meeting back in January, and we have formed a planning advisory committee working group, several working groups, including housing and economic assets, transportation, governmental services, utility infrastructure, agriculture, social infrastructure, and natural and cultural resources. Currently, we're just working through our meeting notes and comments to determine focus points and potential resilience projects. As we move forward, there'll be ample opportunity for public engagement in this process as well. And that is what I have to talk about with respect to the Orange County Department of Planning's planning efforts. And I am looking forward to hearing from our other speakers this evening. I'm getting many ideas just listening to the other speakers. And again, want to thank both the Orange County Land Trust and Cornwall Cooperative Extension for this opportunity to participate this evening.
Yeah, thanks for coming. That was a great presentation. And I also would like to say that climate resilience plan is being done really, really well. We're actually part of that on the agriculture and natural resources PACs. So it's very thorough. Nobody in the county has been left out of that one. Next up, we've got Louis Ingracia, who's the Commissioner of the Town of Wallkill, Department of Public Works.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, good evening. Yes, I would like to take the opportunity. I don't have a fancy screen or presentation to share. However, we'll certainly work through this. Good to see everybody on the meeting tonight. I know a lot of the folks that are on here. Know a lot of them by name, know a lot of them personally, but it's good to put a face with some of the names of the folks I haven't met in person yet. Just a little brief background over here in the town of Wallkill. I have been the Commissioner of Public Works here since 2013. I've been employed by the town of Wallkill since 1986, and the majority of my background is in water and sewer. I hold all grade licenses for water operations, 1A, 1B, C, D, and also a 3A wastewater collection or a 3A wastewater certificate with collections. Involved in a lot of local organizations, good background. I'm the chairman of the Hudson Valley Waterworks. I'm also the president of the Orange County Highway Superintendents Association, and I'm a elected fire commissioner over at the Howells Fire District, where I've been there 40 years this year, 2 terms as chief. Town of Wallkill, I think you're most familiar with, very diverse town, 64 square miles. Little bit of an identity crisis. We surround respectfully the city of Middletown. We're 64 square miles, 31,000 people surrounding their 4 square miles of the same or an additional 30,000 people. So definitely a growing area. Definitely a lot of things that are happening in the town. I like the majority of this program so far with the farming part of it. I come from a farming background. 2 generations before me, my grandfather and my father were black dirt farmers on Ingracia Road right here in the town of Wallkill, and the Bowser Farm and the Ingracia Farm, 160 acres of black dirt over there. And then also they leased a tremendous amount of land back in the day down in Pine Island. So I always tell everybody I miss being an onion farmer by about a half a generation. But I love the farming talk, and I think I'm a farmer at heart, that's for sure. In the town of Wallkill, you're very familiar. There's a tremendous amount of development that's happened here over the past 50 years. When we talk about infrastructure and resiliency, we've suffered some, of course, Irene and Lee, some catastrophic, flooding and things like that. Some of the things that we've actually been able to do to quote unquote combat that and make it better in 2 different areas of the town. Back in 2011, of course, Hurricane Lee, Superstorm Sandy severely impacted not only the town of Wallkill, but all of Orange County, and everyone knows that. As part of that, we applied for and we were selected as one of 22 communities across New York State to be part of the New York State Rising Community Reconstruction. We received $3 million, 2 main projects. One was a $1.3 million channel daylighting and repairing improvement along the Route 211 corridor in the town of Wallkill. The easiest way to explain it is the Pizza Hut / Burger King area of the town. If you remember, that road historically would flood out during these storms, and unfortunately, even more recently, our normal rainstorm seems to be 2 or 3 inches. Water overtopped Route 211, causing damage to the road, causing damage to the properties on Fitzgerald, et cetera. Several options were looked at to prevent this from happening again. The most effective solution was that we created 2 retention basins along along Fitzgerald Drive to contain the water actually before it crosses Route 211. And in addition to the retention basins, existing drainage pipes on the south side of the project were removed and replaced with an open vegetated channel, allowing the water to flow more freely and eliminating the conditions that cause the water to be held back and overtop those properties. The second project was the Winding Brook Flood Plain Mitigation Project. This is area Goshen Turnpike over on the south side, I guess it would be, or the westerly side of the Palisades Parklands, an area of the town that's heavily developed over there. That was a $1.7 million funding project. And what we did there, we on Badami Drive and Ben Lomond Drive, both of those roads were completely flooded out. Water, sewer infrastructure was taken out. We ended up rebuilding all of that. We replaced both of those culverts with large square open bottom channeled culverts, and replaced the roadway, the water and sewer infrastructure and all that above the culvert pipes. And we replaced the water main under Ben Lomond Drive. So those are two projects that stand out that we're very proud of in the town of Wallkill, that we were able to, make some good out of bad, I should say. The other thing I'd like to talk about a little bit tonight, of course, when we're talking about infrastructure, there's been all kinds of talk about the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better and all that good stuff. It all sounds good. Let's see what's going to happen when it's time for the money to be delivered. We are on the forefront of that. We have an amazing person that works with me, Michelle Baker. I think some of you folks on the line know her. She does all of our grants and things like that. We've been very successful in being very aggressive to get things done, grant wise in the town of Wallkill. We're a very progressive town. We always have been. And like I said, a lot of things going on. One other thing I would like to throw out there tonight when we talk about infrastructure is there is a tremendous demand right now for water and wastewater operators. We're losing somewhere between 10 and 15% of our operators to retirement every year. A New York State licensed engineer cannot run a water or sewer plant in the state of New York. They cannot sign the permits without a water or sewer license. So they're just becoming few and far between. So if anybody out there has any inroads, we've worked with the local BOCES, we've worked with the high schools, trying to get folks that maybe aren't destined for college, but we can get them into technical and training programs, and put that out there. If anybody needs information on that, they can certainly reach out to me. Lastly, in the town of Wallkill, we're also very proud because, again, we're a 64 square mile town. Probably about 40% of the town has heavy development, but in our rural areas of the first ward and the fourth ward, we still have, a couple of farming operations, not many, unfortunately, that are left. We do have 2 PDRs in the town that the town was successful in. The first one was the Russ Smiley Farm, now probably close to 15 years ago. And then most recently in 2016, the Sycamore Farm out on Route 211 in the Smith family, 203 acres, fruit and vegetable farm that was protected. And if any money ever comes, quote unquote, down the pipe, we have the Valanga Farm out there on 211, was teed up and ready to go during the last funding. But unfortunately, the funding was taken out. But we're very proud of that as well. So like I said, a lot of things, in a short period of time here, talking about infrastructure, resiliency, things like that. But as we get to the Q&A portion, afterwards, I'll be more than happy to, try to answer any questions that anyone may have. But I really appreciate you, Cornell, like I said, and the Orange County Land Trust putting this together. It's been very informative so far, that's for sure.
Thanks, Lou. That was a ton of information and a lot of good work you guys are doing. Next up, we've got Dwayne Martinez. He's a project manager at Scenic Hudson.
Everybody, thank you. I'll see if I can share my screen really quick. Great. So yeah, I'm the River Cities project manager. We work on urban initiatives at Scenic Hudson in the town of Newburgh, or in the city of Newburgh, Poughkeepsie, and Kingston. I'm going to talk briefly about 2 urban greening initiatives that Scenic Hudson has been involved with in Orange County in the past couple of years. Both initiatives seek to increase ecosystem services of urban green space. The benefits that in part mitigate the impacts of flooding and extreme storm events associated with climate change and extreme weather events. The first is a street tree initiative that we undertook in 2021. A study done in the city of Newburgh identified over 4,000 locations where trees had been lost or were missing from the landscape. And so we partnered with a few different organizations, Habitat for Humanity, the Greater Newburgh Parks Conservancy, among some others. And we worked alongside a strong block association of residents to plant 9 street trees on South Miller Street in the city of Newburgh. And we really saw the empty street tree pits as opportunities to provide nature-based solutions and critical infrastructure for community well-being. Trees are great green infrastructure that work to intercept, absorb, retain, and slow down stormwater where the rain falls in urban areas. And so reducing urban stormwater runoff volume and the transfer of non-point source pollution of toxins that are commonly found in urban areas is one of the goals of this project. And so beyond flood mitigation and climate resilience, we also want to talk a little bit about how these urban ecosystems and street tree canopies can offer other benefits in terms of social resilience. A couple of guideposts that informs our work are studies that highlight the relationship between green space, biodiversity, and then the associated benefits to community well-being in urban areas. So we look to partner with frontline communities and organizations in neighborhoods where access to green space is lacking. And so where that green space is lacking, so are the benefits like storm surge mitigation, and then some of the other benefits of how vibrant, species-rich urban ecosystems can offer lots of benefits in terms of mental health and also potential physical health benefits related to stress reduction and the likeliness that someone will choose to walk over driving a car in a short distance in an urban area. So there's also some data that supports the role that street tree canopy can reduce gun violence and also increase perceptions of neighborhood safety. So we're looking at this whole suite of ecosystem services that green space can offer and trees can offer residents of cities, from increasing community health and reducing heat island effect, and also helping mitigate urban stormwater runoff. The trees really do a great job at absorbing and retaining, and also doing some phytoremediation in their roots for some of those toxins that sort of swirl around in urban environments during storm events. Since that event in last year, the Greater Newburgh Parks Conservancy has really taken the reins of street tree planting in Newburgh, and we're continuing to work with them. They planted over 30 more trees last fall and have a plan to continue to vegetate the landscape in the city of Newburgh in this spring. And then the second project I want to quickly touch on is the Quasaic Creek Greenway. The map up there, the dark green is sort of the tentative project area. And then to the left, you can sort of see the 3 sort of tributaries that are flowing into that lower branch of the Quasaic Creek. This is a long envisioned plan for Greenway and the Lower Quasaic, which forms the border between the city of Newburgh and the town of New Windsor. There's many community partners involved here. The city of Newburgh, Orange County Land Trust, Quasaic Creek Watershed Alliance, the town of Newburgh, or the town of New Windsor. And so Scenic Hudson received a New York State Conservation Catalyst grant through the Land Trust Alliance to look at a feasibility study of a linear park, a trail along this lower stretch of the Quasaic Creek. And so it's pretty much from the Hudson River up to Machado's Lake or Crystal Lake, just beyond that dark green area there to the west. So we're also looking at how this riparian zone can provide much needed direct access to green space to the neighborhoods around the creek here. We're also looking at the linear park and trail will offer many of those benefits that I was describing earlier about community well-being, but will also continue to play a key role in urban stormwater management, not only acting as a large permeable surface in a densely populated urban area with a lot of hardscape, and that the riparian area also has a lot of vegetation to absorb and retain, channel, and slow down the stormwater as it moves from the hardscape into the estuary, but also much greater capacity than street trees to absorb and intercept water where it falls. And so this we're really looking, so right now this project is really close to being advertised, the RFP for a professional consultant to look at the feasibility of constructing and developing this greenway. We're really excited about that. And we're really looking forward to working with our partners to sort of see how this this type of urban greenway can really do that whole suite of benefits, not only for climate resilience and flood mitigation, but really increase the quality of life for residents in the city of Newburgh and adjacent in the town of New Windsor, but then also be a really a gem of open space for Orange County in general. So those are our two projects, and love to take questions later if folks have anything to ask. So thanks.
Thank you. That's a lot of really important work. Next up, we've got Alex Wolf, who's a conservation scientist from Scenic Hudson.
Okay, thank you, Eric, and thanks everybody for being here tonight. Due to time constraints, I'm going to try to do just a quick overview of a few tools and resources that are out there. Everything I'm going to show, I'm going to put links to websites for in the chat, so don't worry, don't try to read everything. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is tidal wetlands in the Hudson River. And I think we've heard from a lot of speakers this evening about the importance of wetlands for mitigating flood, for slowing down floodwaters, making sure they're absorbed slowly into the soils instead of running off quickly. And it's also always important to realize that wetlands have lots of other benefits for wildlife habitat, for recreation, for fishing, all these things. So in addition to all of the riverine and stream wetlands and lake wetlands that Orange County has inland, there's also, of course, the Hudson River and the tidal zone. And tidal wetlands are a pretty unique habitat type in the Hudson Valley. They're only found along the tidal reaches of the Hudson. And they have some unique properties, including being really good nursery habitat for a lot of our migratory fish and game fish like striped bass. They're also great places for waterfowl and other wildlife to live. And they're going to be increasingly important as we look at both increased rain events and sea level rise. And these tidal wetlands are going to help control flooding along the Hudson River shorelines. They're a bit different from some other types of wetlands in that there are different zones based on elevation, and these zones are inundated at different frequencies. So wetlands that are lower down can be flooded twice a day by tides. And there are different vegetation communities that go along with those. So what I'm showing here is what's called a story map. It's sort of an interactive visual journey through an analysis that Scenic Hudson did called Protecting the Pathways that looked at what the fate of these tidal wetlands is going to be with rising sea levels. And so you can click across the tabs here. And again, I'll put the link for this story map into the chat as soon as I'm done. But we actually have interactive maps, and the story map will tell you how to use this map. And what we've done is actually mapped where we expect these tidal wetlands to be threatened and where they might actually expand and grow with rising sea levels. And so here we're looking at the mouth of Moodna Creek. You can see the dark green is current wetland, tidal wetland that's going to persist into the future likely. We have some areas in red that will be lost to sea level rise. As the water levels rise due to sea level rise, that area will be drowned and eventually become just underwater mudflats. We also have areas where there's going to be new wetland. As the waters get higher, the wetlands may expand in some areas. You're seeing that in light green. And then, of course, in some areas, sea level rise and these tidal wetlands are going to run smack into developed areas. And that's what you're seeing in the orange there. And so these maps really give us an indication of where some future opportunities will be and also where some future issues may arise. And so if I go north here on our map towards the Quasaic Creek, which Dwayne was just talking about. So here's Machado's Lake here and the lower Quasaic. And we can see that sea level rise is actually going to push the tidal reach of Quasset Creek farther inland. And we are going to be seeing some wetland expansion, but we also see lots of places where the wetland really can't expand because there's already development there. And so just some things to think about as we move into the future. So again, I'll let everybody explore this story map on their own time, and you can get into sort of the key results of our analysis, a couple case studies, and then explore the interactive map yourself. So switching gears, I did want to just share very briefly, and I know Lindsay mentioned this at the top of our presentations here, but the Flood Resilience Network is a network that a lot of organizations in the Hudson Valley are becoming involved with. And the idea here again is sort of getting communities talking to each other, working together, learning from each other, and then also bringing all of those communities together to learn from technical experts. And so we've put together, Scenic Hudson's been involved, the DEC's estuary program has been involved, a number of other great partners, Cornell Co-op Extension. So lots of great resources at hand here, and I just want to hit on a few of them. If you scroll down to the middle of this page here, you will find sort of handouts on tools and programs to help with community flood resilience. Some of the organizations that are involved, and a lot of times when you start learning about this stuff, it's a bit of alphabet soup with all these acronyms and who are these employees and what's CCE. It's all here in these documents. Lindsay also mentioned the Scenic Hudson Sea Level Rise Mapper. That's actually one of several mappers that are available for the Hudson River and New York. Our Sea Level Rise Mapper, the Scenic Hudson Sea Level Rise Mapper, was really designed for ease of use. It's sort of an entry-level mapper that we hope that anybody is going to be able to use and understand really easily. So if somebody is totally new to the topic of sea level rise and just want to sort of get a sense of it and visualize where it might be happening in Orange County, the Scenic Hudson Sea Level Rise Mapper is a great option. If you are a town planner, a county planner, somebody who likes to get into the weeds and get wonky, there are lots of other tools that incorporate more data, including data on infrastructure, vulnerable communities, et cetera. And so I encourage you to check out some of the options. And we've put together this sort of guide table just showing sort of what the features of these different mappers are. So for the sake of time, I'm going to stop there. Like I said, I'll share links, and thanks everybody for being here tonight. I've enjoyed the presentation so far and looking forward to the next few.
Thanks, Alex. And like he said, there's a lot of information there in the chat. For the last section here, we're going to switch to mitigation through land conservation. So what can we do to mitigate all of these things that we're seeing? We're going to begin with Allison Branco, who is Acting Director of Climate Adaptation at the Nature Conservancy.
Hi, folks. Thanks for having me. Let me, as with everyone else, bear with me while I get this PowerPoint going. Okay. So what I want to talk about today is sort of the big picture about flooding and how we're handling it all across the state. I want to be super clear, Orange County is not the only place dealing with this. We have flooding in our ocean coastlines. We have flooding around all our rivers and creeks. The Great Lakes have flooding problems. This is a New York-wide issue. And, you know, unfortunately, we have been very reactive, and we've implemented a lot of kind of short-term solutions thus far. And so I would like to talk about maybe a different way to go about this. I won't belabor the flooding impacts because obviously we've heard and seen lots of great information about that today. Sorry, I'm just going to check and make sure. Okay, good. But I will just say New York has had 20 major floods, lots and lots of smaller ones in the last 25 years. It's about the same number as the prior 100 years. So this is something that's really happening a lot more often everywhere around New York. And so it's not just that we're not dealing with it or that we're overdeveloping. The climate is changing and we have a new reality to deal with. And as everyone has talked about, these impacts are major to our economy, to our way of life, to our culture. And it's important to remember too that the impacts of these floods are not experienced in the same way by everyone across New York. Some folks are better able to bounce back from these things. Some have more resources to deal with it. And that's a really important thing to remember as we figure out how to adapt to all of this. But the fact is, floodplains are a really important habitat. It's a really important part of our landscape. They move and store our floodwaters. They allow groundwater recharge, slowing down that massive rise of water when there's a big storm. They're really important to biodiversity. They're a very important habitat for tons and tons of different species that are important to our industry, as well as just our recreation. They dampen energy and waves. That's particularly true in more open water like the Hudson River and down on the shoreline. They, of course, contain a lot of important agriculture and forestry resources, and they're really important to our recreational opportunities in town. And green spaces like floodplains have so many co-benefits, not just to flooding, but they help our mental health, social cohesion, public health, all that good stuff. And so what we really need to do is keep those floodplains functioning so that all of those things that I just listed can continue to exist in our communities. And so because we have a lot more water, that means we have to do things differently in order to keep those floodplains functioning. So what we would propose is that whenever we're dealing with flooding, we kind of take a step back, think big picture and across the landscape instead of just one site at a time, and be a little bit more thoughtful when we decide which solutions to implement to address the fact that we basically have put ourselves and our stuff in the way of all this floodwater. And so first and foremost, what we want to do is protect those floodplains that are undeveloped right now. The ones that are natural, the ones that are functioning the way they're supposed to, let's keep it that way. Let's not make this problem any worse. And then where that's already too late, which as we've heard is a lot of places, we want to back up. We like to say make way for water. I heard earlier today, make room for the river. Make way for water is sort of more generic. It applies to the coastline and the Great Lakes too. But that's what we need to do. This water is coming. No one is stopping it. So the best thing for everyone, ourselves and our safety, but also all those important functions of the floodplain, is to back up a little bit and make room. And I think it's really important to remember, it doesn't mean everybody in New York leaves because there's a lot more floodwater. You just have to back up a little bit. We need to rearrange our puzzle pieces a little bit and make space for this water. So that's what we should do where and when we possibly can. Only in cases where that's not possible should we then start going to some of the next options, passive risk reduction options like raising buildings, for example, or making our road stream crossings bigger. I heard a couple things about that tonight. That's a great solution. We're never going to eliminate all the places where roads cross streams. If we did that, we could never get around. So it's not possible to keep those places natural or undevelop them. So where that's the case, we need to make those culverts and passageways bigger, let that water flow, more water, all that flood water, and that helps keep the rest of us all safe. Only if that's not possible do we implement these crazy active reduction measures like deployable flood walls and, you know, those things that require a very well-prepared network of people to do a bunch of stuff in a big hurry. And then only as a very last resort should we be implementing these things that have a lot more negative consequences for nearby properties, for the environment, things like hardening our shoreline, channelizing our rivers, those kinds of things. Certainly there are places where that's the only viable option and it needs to be done. So we need to save those options that do have more negative consequences where they're most needed and not implement them all the time just because it seems like the quick and easy thing to do. Because what we have to do is when we zoom out across the landscape, we really want to change the balance of these solutions that we're seeing being implemented. So I would argue that right now, what we have is kind of the bottom half of this figure, where we have a lot of those hardened shorelines and erosion prevention things and that kind of stuff, and then not enough of those natural features that not only protect us from flooding, but have lots of other benefits. We need to flip that balance. So we have more of that natural stuff that has all the co-benefits, that has a functioning floodplain, and just a few of those places where we're really defending ourselves against all that water. Sorry, I will just point out that all of these names here and this title up top, the Nature Conservancy has kind of written up this concept of flipping this balance and that stepwise decision-making framework that I talked about into a paper. We hope to see it published soon so that we can share it with folks. And I'll just throw in a plug. Someone spoke about the infrastructure bill earlier. That's super important. Don't forget, likewise, we have a bond act, hopefully coming to fruition in New York. It'll be on the ballot in November. Both of those things have a ton of funding available for flood risk reduction and building resilience. So it's in all of our best interest to get ready to take advantage of this money. There's a lot of funding to help us address these problems, in particular by using nature to protect ourselves rather than fighting against it. This slide is a little specific to residential issues, but I just want to show you the list in the middle here about, so that second tier that I showed in the hierarchy is about getting out of the way of the water. And one really important way to do that is through voluntary government-funded buyouts. And that can happen to a farm as well as to a house. These typically happen after a disaster, which is never an ideal way to do things. But there are a lot of other problems with these programs as well. They're amazingly slow, so that you have to rebuild a lot of times because you need to live somewhere while you wait for the government to buy your house from you. They're super inflexible. They have gobs and gobs of red tape and paperwork and rules. Prioritization of these can sometimes get a little too political. Oftentimes they have economic development goals, or because they're funneled through economic development agencies. And so when that's the case, you kind of forget about all those benefits of nature and floodplains. And there's almost never a plan for how to steward the land afterward or money to do so. And so at the Nature Conservancy, we had this hypothesis, and lots of other folks have thought about this as well. All of those things that I just said that are problematic about those programs, land trusts are really good at. So maybe land trusts should be involved in this process and help us use nature to protect ourselves from flooding. They're fast and efficient. They're very good with landowner assistance. They're super flexible. They know about different kinds of easements. They're good at clearing up title issues. Typically, land trusts are a small local organization with ties in the community. They're a real partner, like the folks on this group today. You're hearing from all kinds of different aspects of this issue, and there's a bunch of land trusts involved. Also, land trusts know whatever the local land use is. Land trusts in urban areas are good at that stuff. Land trusts in rural areas are good at that stuff. They're also really good at prioritizing across the landscape. They don't always know what's going to be available, but they know where their priorities are and how something slots in. They're good at long-term planning, which is really important in terms of the floodplain, because you're never going to buy out a whole place all at once. So they have to be able to have that long-term plan, but sort of pick it off a little bit as you go. Land trusts, of course, their bread and butter is stewardship and restoration of the lands that they own. And so they solve that problem. And of course, land trusts, they're part of the community. Many of the employees actually live in the community. They want that open space, the public access to recreation and all those other benefits. And I think there are some benefits to land trusts as well. They have a real desire to get involved in this climate issue, and kind of just generic open space protection doesn't always get them far enough. So this is a good way to be involved there. A lot of land trusts have water quality and habitat goals. Those are very compatible. This can give them new sources of funding, et cetera. So potential benefits to land trusts as well. So we held some workshops with land trusts to try to learn about what they thought of this issue. Have they gotten involved in the purchase of floodplains in the past? And essentially what would be needed to make them want to get more involved. And we did this with some funding from the Land Trust Alliance Conservation Catalyst Fund also. And what we learned is this: land trusts are interested in this, in not just protecting the undeveloped floodplains that are left, but also in removing development from floodplains and helping us all make way for water. They really see it as a win-win, both for the river or the shoreline and for the land trust, and a new way to advance some of their conservation goals, potential new revenue streams, and a really good way to not just advance that climate issue, but also to help the municipalities that they are often partnered with. But they're a little cautious. Especially the undevelopment of the floodplain is a new area for land trusts. There's a steep learning curve. They don't always have the right expertise or experience for some of the more complicated stuff about removing development from the floodplain. There's not a lot of institutional support for this kind of thing. And the incentives are low. So some of the barriers and challenges you can see listed here. they really just need some help to get over these hurdles. It's a complex kind of a transaction. Sort of the dollars per acres value proposition doesn't always work out, especially a land trust operating in an area where there's a ton of open space still available to be protected. You can get a lot more acres when it's already undeveloped than to undevelop some area. So they need some help kind of overcoming a lot of these challenges. And so one thing that we're hoping to do is really push forward some of these challenges and opportunities to government agencies that fund buyout programs, to encourage them just with some few tweaks in their programs. They can really make it a lot easier for land trusts to get involved in this. And then some of those benefits that we talked about can be realized, both for the people, the floodplain, the community, and for the land trusts themselves. So land trusts are really well suited to helping you if you're a municipality or even just a landowner. If you want to make way for water, land trusts are a great partner in this. And I will say, today they're a great partner. They're ready to do this. They're pretty good at it. And we have a lot of work to do to make it a lot easier for them to do a better job of it in more places. Land trusts really want to address climate change, and this is an important way for them to do that. But this is new territory for them, especially the undevelopment of the floodplain, and so they really need some help to make that happen. And there's my contact information. As you saw at the beginning, you have it. So thanks for having me tonight.
Thanks so much, Allison. That was great. We're going to speed right along here because we are getting up to time here. So next we're going to have Mimi Hanley. She's New York Senior Program Manager at the Land Trust Alliance.
I'm going to keep my video off because I'm having some lighting issues here, but thank you. I'm really excited to be part of the discussion tonight. And we've heard a lot of benefits of making way for water this evening, and I'm happy to add one more benefit to that list. And it's the ability to help advance the vitally important 30 by 30 initiative. And you may have heard about 30 by 30 in the past, but in brief, research from scientists, including the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, have proposed a target of conserving 30% of lands and waters by 2030 to help prevent species extinction globally, protect biodiversity, and buffer against the worst impacts of climate change. The Biden administration set a goal for 30 by 30 for our nation by an executive order back in 2021. And so that leads to the question, well, how much land is already conserved? And most accepted figures are about 13% of our country, and that includes national parks, wilderness areas, permanent conservation easements, state parks, other conserved areas. And there's a big gap between 13 and 30, but the good news is that approximately 60% of all land in the US remains in a mostly natural condition or could be restored to one. So that makes a national 30 by 30 target ambitious, but achievable. But I would say that in order to make sure that New York directly benefits from a 30 by 30 goal, we need to set and achieve our own one. And to do that, it's going to really take a mix of strategies, including public and private land conservation. And, we know it's achievable if we work collaboratively. The Nature Conservancy has collected data and shows that 19% of New York is already protected. So we have a good head start. And Allison pointed out, land trusts are really well suited for this work. They're local experts. We're really, really lucky in this area to have strong partners like Orange County Land Trust and Scenic Hudson, who are able to really ramp up our conservation efforts. And so we can see that a 30 by 30 goal is achievable from a conservation perspective. And we know that we also just really need to be strategic about what comprises that 30%. And the way I look at it, right, a very simplified way, since it's getting late in the evening, is the 30 by 30 goal can help protect biodiversity and protect people. We need to be strategic and data driven. And there's actually a really good article in today's New York Times on just this topic. If you have a moment, do take a look at it. And what the article points us out is that from a biodiversity perspective, we need to protect and restore the right properties. Otherwise we gain sort of a large percentage of protected area, but we've done very little, right, in protecting areas that are most important when it comes to climate change. And we want to make sure that we're strategic when we think about a 30 by 30 goal protecting people too. We want to ensure that the benefits of 30 by 30 are felt equitably across our state. So that means projects in all kinds of areas, urban, rural, suburban. And when we're trying to protect people from climate change impacts, dealing with some of the issues that we've talked today about flooding is critical, and it needs to be encouraged. There are clearly people in our state and right in Orange County who are in harm's way and their livelihoods are at risk. So addressing some of these flooding issues while working to get to that 30 by 30 goal is really critical. Of course, we can also at the same time work on our safe drinking water lands, clean air, access to open space, food production, and clean up properties that are polluted and detrimental to the health of wildlife and people. So, we want to make sure that we're looking at restoration activities too when we think about 30 by 30. So, in order to achieve 30 by 30, what's missing in all of this, right, is we need to set the goal. And right now, New York can be the first state in the nation to enshrine a 30 by 30 goal in law. California has a goal that was established by an executive order, and other states have passed legislative resolutions, but no state yet has passed a bill. And more good news, last year, the Senate passed a bill, the New York State Senate passed a bill, and there's been lots of activity in recent weeks on the Assembly side. And we're hopeful that a bill will go to the floor for a vote in the next few weeks, with the Senate then passing same as legislation. So if you want to keep score at home on how this works out, the Senate bill is 6191, the Assembly bill is 5390B. And I would encourage you, if you want to learn more, to reach out, but be in touch with your local officials. Tell them that you support establishing a 30 by 30 goal. Tell them that you care about land and water and how those benefits can really make a difference to the people in Orange County and around our state. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Jeremy from Orange County Land Trust to finish up the presentations for us.
Okay, and I'm going to make this super quick because I can hear my daughter now knocking on the door. So let's get started. So yes, if there was ever a time for land trusts to step up, it's certainly now. Land conservation is and will continue to be a dynamic tool to mitigate the risks and realities discussed tonight, while also supporting farmers and landowners and communities in the process. For the sake of increasing flood resilience in the county, strategically advancing conservation agreements in undeveloped floodplains and stream and river corridors and natural flood storage areas like wetlands needs to be prioritized across the board. Long term, land conservation is a cost-effective approach to flood mitigation with additional benefits like water filtration and carbon capture, recreation, and so forth. And these efforts can help keep lives out of harm's way and reduce damage and financial losses. One of our current projects that we're hoping to close on this spring is a conservation easement on a farm in the town of Montgomery. And this is situated across from I-84, right across from the largest warehouse in Orange County. The farm also contains a floodplain forest right on the Wallkill River, which is also going to be protected as a result of the conservation easement. And the funding for this project was made possible thanks to a farmland protection implementation grant from the New York State Department of Ag and Markets. And that kind of brings me to a point that Allison touched upon, and that was cash flow. That's certainly a barrier. And, while there's a number of state and federal grant programs, I think, it would be really wonderful if we can get a statewide Community Preservation Act passed so that all towns in New York can take action. And we've seen the successes with the town of Warwick. And if other towns can replicate those successes, I think that can really make an impact. But we're not quite there yet. So I'm hopeful that the New York State Legislature can, realize the full potential of this program and get it passed. I'll end on that note.
All right. Well, I know we're getting, 4 minutes till 8, so I don't want to keep anybody much longer on a Thursday night. But if there, in all of these many wonderful, informative presentations, if there are any questions that anybody would like to bring forward to the group, now would be the time.
Yeah, I think I'll contribute a little bit to all the discussion on board. I will focus a little bit on food safety aspect. So you see under the land, the flooding land area with regards to flooding, you will notice that farmers have to comply with FISMA. They have to comply with gaps. Okay, let me just go straight instead of the abbreviations. The FISMA is Food Safety Modernization Act, and they have to also comply with good agricultural practices, and they have to also comply with the produce safety rule. All these things are food safety requirements that they need to meet, either through the state level or through the federal level or through the third party level. At the same time, you and I know that some of these sorts of contaminations are going to come from microbial contamination. And other microbial contamination, you will find things like pesticides, maybe something like parasitic virus and all those kind of things like resulting in this contamination. Then we have sorts of microbial contamination also coming out from the upstream farms when there's a runoff or maybe like a manure being running off to these flooding areas, or when there is something like sewage system, like leakage in sewage system, all resulting in some of this chemical contamination. Then we have some of these pesticide residues from farms, like all these things playing roles in this area. So coming to the food safety perspective with regards to flooding, this also has a major role in terms of maybe getting funding available to help farms that find themselves in situations like that, so that they can be able to recover with time. Because most of the edible portion of this produce that comes into contact with this flooding have to be thrown away, and plants that don't come directly into this flooding in terms of edible portion have to also be observed for some time. And moreover, fields with such nature of flooding also have to be observed for maybe 60 or more days before they can start doing something about it. So all these things are areas of concern when it comes to flooding and food safety aspects with regards to produce. When it comes to produce, it's not only produce, but it also goes beyond to animals and also to human as well, because all these things are area of concern to us. So this is a little bit I just want to add with regards to the discussion on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a lesser known issue of flooding for farmers. So if there are no other questions, I'm sure there are other questions, but let's be real, it's 8 o'clock and there were about, I don't even know how many speakers we just had. Hard to pick one question out of all that. So what I'm going to do is, just to follow up, I'll email out the list of all the speakers with their emails that we put at the beginning of the presentation, which we will also have the recording up on our website, Cornell Cooperative Extension, Orange County. So you can go there, watch anything that may have piqued your interest, and I'll send out the list of speakers and their emails so that if you do have a question that comes up tomorrow, you can send that off to them. And just thanks to Orange County Land Trust. Thanks to everybody who got involved, all the speakers. Really wonderful to have you all, and we'll be in touch. Have a good evening.